Welcome back. Heads of state and religious leaders from around the world, they are on their way to Rome, all to attend, of course, Pope Francis's installation mass this coming Tuesday in Eastern time. Here it'll be very early in the morning, so set your clocks. Now, the church that the new Pope inherits, as we know, it faces some real problems, many of them of its own making. Question is, how can Pope Francis confront these issues? And that remains to be seen. And for some insight into what type of a leader he will be, I spoke with someone who knows the new Pope very well, that Edward Cardinal Egan, the former Archbishop of New York. He was behind those closed doors in the Vatican when then Cardinal Bergoglio was almost elected Pope 8 years ago during the last conclave. Now, we spoke about a wide range of issues, from parochial school closings to the possibility of married priests.
What surprised me was that they chose a man who was 76 years old. Yeah. However, if he had been 66 years old, I think that would have been a slam dunk. You need only one voting. Nonetheless, I know him very well. He and I became cardinals together in 2001. And this is the most pleasant, unassuming, smart, quiet fellow you'd ever want to meet. And while I certainly would vote for him in any office, including the executive of Westchester County if he would run, or mayor of New York, or anything else, at 76, I didn't think that they would be voting for him. He would certainly have had my vote had I been a voter. I have great affection for him, great admiration for him, and I think everyone's going to like him because he's immensely likable.
What would you characterize the health of the church that now Pope Francis takes over? Does it matter geographically where you ask that question?
That's how I was going to say. I would say it's much better here in New York than I seem to hear in other parts of the world. I was here as Archbishop for 9 years, and we grew by 204,000 registered parishioners. Well, that's a diocese. In my 9 years, contrary to everything you might have heard, we grew by well over 15,000 in the enrollment in our schools. The budget of our Catholic charities went up 126% in 9 years. So I don't see, I've never had any of this scandal business, as you know, and so I don't see anything but a very bright future. But, you know, I'm a good New Yorker, and New Yorkers kind of focus on New York. I think the church has got a very bright future. Certainly it does here. And I'm not so sure that we get a good report in other parts of the world either.
But even in New York, I've got kids in parochial school, and one of the things they tell you at the beginning of the year is, and of course there's capital campaigns like there is for everything, but they say, listen, if you want this, meaning parochial school, you're going to have to fight for it because it's getting harder and harder. And we see, just in our neck of the woods, in our region, so many doors shuttering. Sure. And we also know that the amount of empty seats, let's say, at people at seminaries, they're real. Does something have to change? Is it economics? We've seen bankruptcies in other parts of even the United States in our archdiocese. Help me out from the economics and then the simple math about people going to the priesthood and the parochial school.
Economically, I think everyone knows, and Cardinal Dolan says it all the time, we are in very good position. We might not have been in a very good position some years ago, but I can report to you that we're in a very good position. In fact, I put right in the report, we have no indebtedness of any kind at all here in the Archdiocese of New York, and we're doing very well. The problem with the schools is, of course, the problem of economics. Yeah. You have to pay teachers a proper wage. Here in New York, I am told, and the newspapers claim, that we're paying somewhere, we taxpayers, something in the area of $20,000 to $22,000 per child in public schools. We're providing that education for $4,000, $5,000, and incidentally, our kids all graduate from high school, and 96% of them go on to college. In other words, for perhaps a fourth of what the city spends, we produce an effective product. So the economics of this thing is simply this. All sorts of prices have gone up. And even though we're very good at what we do, and even though we do it at a fraction of what the others do it, we only can do so much. We can't print money. What the television and the radio ought to be saying, and never will, is how in the world can we let an effective school system that can handle the thing for a fraction of what the public school system spends, how could we let it go? Well, we're doing our best, we're struggling.
You just see the devastated families when schools have to shutter their doors because they love the product and they love the environment for the kids. How about priests? And you've had some interesting conversations on the idea of allowing priests, or at least to have the conversation about maybe it's time to go back to where it was back, I guess, in the 13th century when priests were allowed to marry and have families.
Is there anything in Catholic doctrine that would oppose having a non-celibate priesthood? Not at all. Who's going to make that decision? Well, certainly not I, but I certainly think that this is something that people are going to be talking about and are talking about. Where does Pope Francis stand? I don't know. In and of itself, is it an obstacle? Is it impossible with Catholic doctrine? The answer is no.
It's funny. Yesterday at Mass, relayed the story of there was a prostitute that was to be stoned, right. And Jesus turned and said, "For those without sin, cast the first stone," wonderful. And they all dispersed. Yeah. And maybe it's just memory, but it seemed that 15, 20 years ago in church, there was less about the culture wars than we'll hear on Sundays, and more about feed the hungry, clothe the naked, and the basic premise sure. of looking out for those that don't have as much. Right. I talk to other people in the pews. I don't think I'm alone in that Sundays have gotten, for too many of us, too political, and the basics of what the church was, and not about the social debates, forgetting who's right and wrong on it. Do you hear that too?
Oh, surely, but I'm going to take a bow. In my 9 years, do you know one time that I was involved in a political discussion?
I would hazard the guess is no.
I've been very, very careful not to ever get involved. I'm friendly to all the politicians. I have great respect for the people who are our political leaders. It's not easy, and many of them do excellent, excellent work. But I have been very careful never to make a partisan statement or to get involved in any partisan politics at all. And I believe that's the right way to go. The achievement of the Archdiocese of New York in the area of service to the poor is immense. I'll tell you a little story. Years ago, when we were dedicating blocks and blocks of new housing that the Archdiocese created in the South Bronx, mm-hmm. Mayor Giuliani was with me, and we were up on the platform. We each had to say something, you know. The Secretary of HUD was there, and so forth. And in a throwaway line, Mayor Giuliani, who's a good friend of mine, turned to me and he said, "You know, without Catholic Charities, we couldn't run this city." And I said, "Well, you know, Your Honor, I'm going to speak right after you. And if you forget to say that, yeah. I'll tell the crowd what you just told me." Eh? And he laughed, and we get along very fine.
I've heard two different schools of thought. That the church says, you know what, maybe getting smaller isn't the worst thing, and we'll have the more of the truly committed here. And then the other is, we shouldn't only just open our doors, but we should actively recruit and try and bring those people who may have either left or are casual at best. Which approach, you've probably heard both, which approach do you think is healthier for the church to take?
Well, it's a good conclusion to our conversation because for me, the answer is you go out and invite more and more in, and that is absolutely the only approach that I would even consider. This is what I believe in. I believe in going out and bringing people in. That's why I delight in telling you about our growth. That for me is the name of the game. And so in conclusion, I would simply say this, that I'm all for the go out and bring people in and sit down and talk and aim for understanding, aim for conversion, but understand that everyone is welcome, more than welcome. The door is always open, and I hope and pray we will continue to grow here in the Archdiocese of New York, because I do believe that the more people that hear the gospel and embrace it, the better we'll all be, the better the city, the nation, the world will be.
Now, to see the full interview, please head over to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/RichardFrenchLive. All right, we're going to be right back, everybody, after this. And big trial beginning in New York on an issue debated many times at this table, stop and frisk. We'll talk about that after this.